that's supply and demand. And at the moment, it's booming out there for pilots. But that's going to eventually slow down. So if you're just starting with the likes of, say, Qantas, for example, you've been put on like a A320 or something like that in your right seat, there's every chance that you could be in that right seat for 10 years. So it just depends on yourself. If you want to make that move and go and get your ATPL and be eligible to apply for other airlines, I suggest do it as soon as you can, because you're missing out on opportunities.
G'day and welcome to another exciting episode 80 of the Flight Training Australia podcast. The podcast all about flight training, flying, and, well, just all things aviation in Australia. G'day, I'm your host Trent Robinson. Thank you for joining me. Sincerest apologies for missing last week's episode. I was just snowed under with work, trying to get everything wrapped up before I jumped in a plane and headed down to Perth. So sorry about that, but we are back. And had a great chat with the guys from Revesco Aviation, which we'll talk about momentarily, and working through things with my MCC. But it was fantastic just to catch up with everybody, everyone down at the Aero Club, Goldfields, down at RFDS, and everyone in between, some of the old maintainers as well, and even Bryce, one of the aircraft or the airport controllers, ground controllers there, looks after the airport and aerodrome management, and organising some more interviews with people, all aspects of aviation, which I'm sure you'll find fascinating and interesting, and I look forward to bringing you those in some future episodes. Certainly things going well down there, plenty of activity, and it's great to see a bit of a revitalisation. Some new operators with Airflight got their school up and running down there as well. Innovation's still going strong, and Singapore Airlines as well, starting up again with their student cadet recruitment, is all picked up, and they're not really relying on that public stream. In fact, I don't think they're doing that anymore. So good to see. And for everyone that I ran into, it was great to see you. All right, so just before we get into today's episode, there'll be all the contact details for John and Wayne will be in the episode description. Check those out. And remember, if you want to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, you can do so. Just search for Trent Robinson Aviation. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. And the ultimate follow is to follow me and support me on Patreon. If you truly feel that the episodes are just giving you great information, it's worthy of a small tip or a payment, you can do that. It can be a one-off. It can also be a monthly subscription. All the fees are completely tax deductible. You can put it in your tax return, and it supports me. It enables me to just spend the time that goes towards each episode to bring you as a diverse and much content as possible. 80 episodes so far, pretty much one every week, and it does take a lot of time and effort. So anything that you're able to do to help out with that is greatly appreciated. So go check out patreon.com/Flight Training Australia. The details are there, and you can just follow me like you do a social media page as well. Don't even need to pay anything, but if you're willing to and able to, I know times are still tough, but that goes a long way, and eternally grateful. And you can also access me for anything you need to know. All right, so in today's episode, as I said, I did my MCC down in Perth. Now, a bit of a funny situation because I've actually already got my ATPL. I got it back in 2003, and an opportunity that's come up for me in Darwin, which I'll elaborate on later, they still wanted me just to go and do it just for the experience and the process, which I, of course, was happy to do. So went down to Jandakot and spoke to the guys at Revesco, and John Goldsmith and Wayne Clemesha, both very, very experienced, years and years of airline flying, charter flying, simulator training, delivery, and between the three of us, tens of thousands of hours experience. And it was just a really fantastic time and a really great chat to talk all things airliners, MCC, and ATPL. Now, we'll apologise for the quality. We recorded it in a room, so it was a little bit average, but I've cleaned it up the best I can. Hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you after the interview. All right, so this episode I'm joined by two aviators well known to many based out of Perth. I've got John Goldsmith, who's here to talk about the Multi-Crew Cooperation course, and Wayne Clemesha. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks. Good to see you, Trent.
Yeah, thanks, Trent.
All right, guys. So, look, very excited to get this done. I'm obviously just completing the MCC course here now, and it's been really great to do it. And I know there's a heap of questions about that, and obviously then leading on to the ATPL flight testing. So before we get into that, let's just get a bit of a background for you guys. So, John, do you want to just tell us what got you interested in aviation? Just a bit of a rundown there.
Oh, very quickly. I started flying wooden models when I was about 30 because I had 2 young kids and wasn't interested in watching television. And that sort of, one day we all went out to Serpentine, saw people jumping in these things that they were building and thought, gee, that looks like a lot more fun than this. And so did that. And then one thing led to another. And for me, it was never about becoming a commercial aviator. I just wanted to know more. I wanted to be a safer pilot. So once I was flying privately, I went, oh, that's a bit limiting. You know, get a night rating. I went, well, I don't want to fly a single engine at night, I'll get a twin rating. So then you do that and you go, oh, there's some cloud, I want to fly through that, so better get an instrument rating. Well, I don't really feel like I'm safe, better get a commercial license. So, the whole thing leads on, and then you've got an instrument rating and a commercial license, and a mate of mine came in and said, look, I want to know about building recording studios. I said, well, I wouldn't mind flying aeroplanes. And he was a guy called Tom Van Wees, who was flying out of Perth, flying in Navajo for AWP contracting. So I got the gig flying that. He got his studio built, and the rest is history.
Brilliant. And then you decided you'd probably find a way to pay it all back. So you're eventually getting a job.
Well, the good thing about me, I was, if someone rang from Kalgoorlie to say, look, we've got an audio job up here, I said, look, I'll come up in a few days and visit you. So I could write my flying off. And but of course nobody else would go to Kalgoorlie to do a job, and they go, well, the job's yours. So I wrote off $1,000 worth of flying to go to Kalgoorlie and picked up about a $400,000 job. So it all worked pretty well.
Brilliant.
Then the commercial part of it started when Ron McGrath put up a Beach 1900 course, which I think in those days we had to pay about $8,000 for. But with that came 50 hours of paid line flying with Great Western. And I thought, well, that sounds like a bit of fun. That was in 2000. And, you did that, you did the 50 hours line flying and you got a casual job there. And, what happened to Great Western was a shame, but then Ron McGrath picked it up. But then, there was someone there that I flew because I loved it, not because I had to, because I had the business. But the chief pilot there was not someone I got on with, so I decided it wasn't fun. I'd moved from there. Within a week, got a call from Network. Do you want to fly the Braz? Love to. And went over there and flew that for about 5 years. Loved every minute of it. But when Lindsay wanted to sell the business to Qantas, probably needed a few less staff. And quite honestly, at the time, business was a bit harder, so I needed to go and take a look at that. And so then hit the pause button on that. And then a couple of years ago, I guess my years of running a business and marketing and communicating with people, and 40 years in aviation set me up to be able to do this course here. Had to go and do the PMI because I didn't have an instructor rating previously. So did that, loved the study, and
there you are.
Here I am.
Yeah, and for those in the Perth area, obviously a bit of a Perth TV celebrity because with that the sound job was with Cosmic, and you just tell everyone about it was the Cannington store, wasn't it? That you had the Wirraway hanging from the ceiling.
Oh, that was at the
Aussie Park. Sorry.
Yeah, it was quite. I got the opportunity to buy this because which belonged to some friends of mine, and they were getting rid of it. So I said, I'll buy it, and so I hung it in the shop, and people would come in and scratch their head and go, why have you got an aeroplane in the store? Well, because it's my store and I want one.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because I went to a lot of trade shows around the world, and every time you'd run into someone in a trade show in Germany or LA or something like that, they'd go, oh yeah, you're the guy with the aeroplane in your shop. So it kind of works, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. Look, I remember even just driving past up in Wanneroo, there's a vampire and a pole there somewhere, and there used to be the old DC3 at Macca's and Midlands.
Yeah.
And I think you did an ad where you're sitting in the aircraft throwing out stuff, saying all these specials and things.
That's right. Yeah. It's just a bit quirky.
Yeah, fantastic.
A lot of fun.
All right, and Wayne, so look, same sort of thing. What sort of got you into it?
I started in the early 90s, and I've just always had a passion for the aviation, and one of my goals was to fly for the RFDS, and of course back in those days it was very hard to get your hours, and so you sort of had to think outside the envelope and try and outbuild to meet the minimums to get in, and consequently I had to go to the bush and did various charter flights for companies, and then I made a decision to combine it with being an instructor, and I wasn't even thinking about doing flight testing at all at that stage. Obviously, I just wanted to sort of accumulate my hours and then get, obviously having the instructor rating, get more experience, leading it into a career path, which I did. And I eventually got in with China Southern back in the day and commenced instructing there as a junior grade 3 and worked my way up. And of course, that was a perfect opportunity to build your hours up. So before you know it, I opened grade 1 and I thought, that was pretty quick. And where do I go from here? And then, of course, there was some opportunities that come about. Again, airlines and regionals weren't hiring at that stage. It was a little bit quiet, as far as recruitment. So I decided to continue to soldier on with the instructor rating. I ended up going across to Adelaide for British Aerospace, doing some instructing over there. I was sort of teamed up to do...
that was sort of formerly flight training Adelaide, wasn't it?
It was flight training Adelaide, come British Aerospace, what it is today. And some of the contracts they had over there was teaching Cathay Pacific. They also had UK pilots over there for British Airways, and it required me getting what they called back then a CAP 504, which was doing an instructor rating again to be able to train under their syllabus. And I did that for a little while, and opportunities were slowly starting to get there. The hours were coming up, and I decided to come back to Perth and continue with charter. I went back to Air Australia, where I originally began my flying, and built some charter hours up, and then from there started to get in the area to be able to be qualified to fly the RFDS. Went and spoke to them, and of course got the job at the RFDS, and then that just sort of opened a few doors for me. From there, I was with them for a few years, and then I decided at some point while I was in there, corporate was possibly a way to go, and I got involved with Revesco Aviation, and from there it sort of kicked it off. And in the meantime, I started to get all these testing privileges for these companies I was working for to be able to do flight testing for various candidates, and which probably leads me here today. I obviously ended up getting onto the ATPL testing privileges, and it's quite good. There's been a big call out there, and of course with the airlines recruiting more, there's big demand for it. So Revesco are in a position to offer training for that as well through our 142, and then basically I could do the flight test for the ATPL.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, well we'll get into that. I know when you're at the RFDS, obviously, all these companies have had issues and things, but I know you had a bit of an incident at the RFDS there. Did you want to chat about that? Because it probably helps shape what you're doing now and where you're at.
Made you more aware of what King Air can do and can't do.
Yeah.
Just essentially we departed one night. We had this pregnant woman on board. She'd never flown before, and I was trying to assure her that things were good in the middle of the night, and had a good nurse on board and a doctor. And we're on our way from Meekatharra to Geraldton, and then sort of passing through about 20,000 feet. It was icing up a fair bit. The aircraft wanted to sort of roll right all the time, and it got to the point I was the autopilot off. I was using cross controls, and it's not a good thing with a T-tail at night icing up. I had to get the nurse to come up the front to assist in operating things for us because both my hands were occupied. Long story short, we got back to Meeka, and engineers come up the next day, and they found that the cables at the back in the King Air, one of the cables had come undone and started binding all the other cables up, so it was actually pulling all the systems one way. So,
yeah, scary.
Yeah, it was. So,
yeah, no, it's interesting you said that, and that it's a reason I wanted to talk about it, because I was talking to my training partner in the MCC here with how we dealt with things at CareFlight/RFDS, same thing, single pilot, and sometimes you would have to use the nurse or doctor as a crew member to come up and read through the checklist or whatever and work it through, and that's, I think it's a good segue into what we're doing here at MCC. So, John, with Revesco, obviously we've got the MCC course and we're using the 777. And I know the 777's been around Jandakot for a very long time, and I think the first owner was probably just a bit unfortunate, a bit ahead of their time, really, because a fantastic tool and beneficial all the same, but it just wasn't a course requirement for anybody. So it was really a bit of an optional extra joy flight kind of thing, whereas now the MCC is a requirement, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's definitely a requirement, but I think I actually know Rick, who started it, because he was actually a keyboard player. He used to sell him gear long before that. I didn't actually know that he had the business, so it was only after I got involved here that I went, oh, yeah, I know him. But his focus really wasn't on flight training. It was really on flight experiences. And he would never have gone to get the 142 approval to be able to do what we're doing. And when Revesco purchased it, there was a whole load of work that had to be done onto it, putting the instructor station in and upgrading it substantially to get it to the point where it was approved for MCC training.
Yeah, great. All right, well, what is MCC? And then we'll just work our way through sort of what it's all about and what's in the course and who should do it and when.
Well, it's multi-crew cooperation. It's obviously what it stands for. And at the end of the day, I mean, it really is a course on communication, teamwork, leadership, decision-making. And you could pretty much do it on any aircraft that requires two crew.
So that's the only real requirement, and just a two-crew aircraft, so it doesn't have to be sort of a complex
and
777.
as you've seen through the course of the week, being someone that's got a lot of single pilot hours and some of the pressure that we've put you under from time to time, you can see how important it is to be competent with a two-crew operation, and knowing when things turn bad, that you can turn around to your buddy there and
use the other person,
and reduce the workload. But it takes a bit of training to do that, because with a single pilot with a lot of hours, your tendency is to just go back to what you know and know well, rather than following the SOPs for the company that you're working for.
And that's something I found too when I was assisting you with the MCC training. The single pilot comes out of these guys. They're so used to doing things on their own, and it's very hard for them to adjust as a PM, for example, monitoring the pilot flying, and they want to indulge and get on that side and flick switches without consulting with the other person. And
it's easier for guys that are, we get a lot of guys through that are, say, just around the 1,000-hour mark. They don't have as much problem as people with 3,000, 4,000 hours of embedded single pilot operations, that we can knock that out of them fairly quickly. Whereas and it particularly happens when the workload is high, because that's when you revert to old habits.
Yeah, it is. It's like that piston to turbine kind of transition of engine phase. Not going, make sure I pitch up paraffin rushing, just to gear up, prop feathered, sit on your hands, nothing more to do. And now this is like, all right, let's just relax. What have we got here? Use the tools available, including the extra person.
Well, the great thing about turbine aeroplanes that they have to be able to climb on one engine. Otherwise,
that's it.
Can't get certified.
That's it. All right. So for someone that's looking at the course, what's involved?
Well, people coming through here really need to have their CPL. I mean, you can do it with a PPL. You really need an instrument rating. But I've had people through here that have been 300 hours. I mean, they really struggle. And
so when do you reckon? I mean, I guess it's a requirement prior to the ATPL test. So we're talking 1,500 hours. Before you're going to need it. So what would you say is the
Look, it very much depends on the person. I've had guys here that are probably just sub 1,000 hours. that are, they're people that are just focused, they've got good brains, they're just straight into it, they do the homework to make sure it happens, and they accelerate through it. I've had people with 3,000 hours that have come through, and it's taken them till the last 30 minutes of Sim 10 to nail it. So it depends a little bit on the person, but around 1,000 hours, between 1,000 and 1,500 hours is probably a good place to do it.
Yeah, I think that would be about right.
Yeah.
And at the end, is there a flight test? Is there a CASA exam that needs to be done or anything like that? Or
no, there's no. It's an assessment. So we just have to assess that you've reached a level of competency. The only little test we do is the little human factors test, which is just to really consolidate the little bit of the human factors that we do in the ground school stuff that we talk about before we get into the sim.
Yeah, okay. And do people need to learn up on the 777 beforehand, or do you think there's anything that's... Obviously not everybody uses the 777 for other course providers, but... No.
Look, the great thing about the 777 is, as you found out, it's a very simple aeroplane to fly. Like if we were doing this in a King Air, this just takes there's a lot of things to do, whereas the 777 is a very automated aeroplane. To make the experience, immersive, it's a good idea to do some of that pre-study. It's really, to say the main thing is getting on the flight deck and knowing where to look. So you can do all the study under the sun, but until you actually sit in that seat and know where to look and find, it's like flying any new aeroplane. It takes you, a few hours to be able to know where to look. And once you know where to look, and as you know, I've done the little video on the FMC programming, and that helps. And getting that takeoff sequence, from being a single pilot where you're leaving your hands on there to that 80 knots checked, V1, hands come off, positive rate, all that sort of stuff is that just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But once you get it, and we start off at a 15% thrust reduction, so the whole thing happens a little bit slower, and then up to 5%, and then we tried the full power today, and we sort of got there. Now if we go back to 15%, you'll go, this is so easy.
Time to make a coffee in the galley.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. I think the one thing probably helps is just if any experience of a bit of autopilot use of some mode understanding, FMA procedures. That's definitely been useful for those that I think just the little Century one will struggle a bit, but just having those activations and understanding the software logic behind it would definitely be an advantage, but not necessary.
Yeah, I think the great thing about this is that you come and do the course and you do all the multi-crew exercises, but being able to do it in this aeroplane is an absolute bonus because you get exposure to that FMC, which is still the current FMC you're going to find in the 787. The mode control panel is very current, so you're being exposed to all those things. So for someone that's making that stepping stone to airlines and go and do a sim test, if they've done the MCC 6 months ago, I've had a lot of guys come back and go, hey, I've got a sim test next week, can I do an hour or two?
Yeah.
I had a guy that never flown a 777, was going to do a sim check for Cathay in Hong Kong. He came in, he bought 3 hours on 3 separate days, and he got the job. He came back and he said, I don't think I would have got the job if I hadn't come and just exposed myself.
It could just help put you just that little bit more at ease in an already stressful situation, and just getting used to the inertia and the weight, I think is the big thing where just it doesn't respond like a Cessna or a Baron.
The simulator actually responds exactly like the aircraft does. As you know, when you haul back on the control column, I mean, nothing happens for a second and a half.
That's right, yeah.
Because it's, year 8 physics, basically.
Well, the elevator's so far back, isn't it?
Yep.
Fantastic. All right, so once they've finished the MCC, like you said, you get a certificate, and I guess the next thing is at the right time, once you've got your ATPL subjects done, they come and see you, Wayne.
They do.
So what's involved with the course. So let's talk about a sort of a commercial graduate working through, and then we'll get into some complications of someone that might already be in a multi-crew airline kind of environment.
Yeah. There's two ways of doing it as far as meeting the training requirements, and as we know in the regulations, it requires a course of training under a 142 organisation, and that can be done in two ways. One is if someone's currently working for an airline as a co-pilot, they have all the subjects frozen for the ATP. Some airlines now have got approval to include their upgrades as captain as they're training towards their ATPL licence. So at the end of their upgrades as command, they will then walk away with command plus an ATPL licence. But that only benefits people that are in the airline. But if someone is a commercial pilot that's just come through the system that wants to do it on their own, Revesco Aviation, we have a 142 training syllabus for the ATP. Essentially, we do it on the simulator, and at the present moment, the simulators we're using are in Melbourne and Brisbane. We tend to use the King Air because it's a practical aircraft. We've got a approval to do 2 crew operations on that because Revesco is involved with the government, the DPC. It means that we have those approvals to do 2 crew operations. Hence why we use the King Air. So
what is the requirement for the simulator that's used? It's pressurised, turboprop, and it's meant to be
simulators approved for the issue of licences.
Yeah.
So the ones that currently are approved is the one in Brisbane, of course, in Maroochydore, and the second one is the Melbourne Sim. The only thing in the Melbourne Sim actually has a limitation as far as no GPS, but there is an instrument out that CASA have allowed certain simulators there for people to operate using ground-based stations instead of using satellite-based navigation. So basically, if people want to choose to operate using VLRs, NDBs, they're still going to do an ILS because part of the flight test includes they get an instrument rating as well. So if someone currently has an instrument rating in Australia that's gone through that process, it revalidates their IPC, so to speak, and they get the ATPL licence because obviously you need an instrument rating to be able to fly under ATPL conditions.
Yeah, right.
But going back to the training, so the first one is the airline, like I said. The second one is Revesco as an approved 142 training syllabus. If someone wants to go through that process, what we do is we tend to team them up, so we require 2 people. They can rotate around. Essentially, they assist each other in the training, and then towards the end, when it's ready for the flight test, the person, obviously, who wants to go first, does his test first, and the other person supports. And then the next day, or whenever they're available, then that person hopefully will reciprocate and operate in a PM, co-pilot role to assist the other guy to do his ATPL flight test.
Yeah.
So all this can be done through Revesco and myself. Obviously, with my testing privileges and that, I sort of was granted that a couple of years ago. And again, we tend to use the simulator because it's safer. If you compare the simulator cost versus an aircraft cost running it, it's probably cheaper in the simulator.
Yeah.
So, cost to, do the training and the flight test is anywhere between, depending on the person's experience, but it could be anywhere between 12,000 to up to 19,000, depending on their experience and their background.
Yeah.
We also do conversion training too, so someone from another country that's under the ICAO that has an ATPL licence, they don't require flight training, but if they've never flown, like the likes of King Air in this case, we do a bit of training to obviously teach them how to fly.
So it's like any overseas thing, you get your qualifications recognised and that's just whatever's needed to pass the test.
Correct. There's a procedure they go through. If they're doing conversion training, they're required, obviously, with their qualifications overseas, i.e. the FAA, UK or somewhere in South Africa, doing conversion training, you fill out a 61-4 alpha form, that you write all your qualifications, upload all parts of your licence and logbook stuff, send it into CASA. They'll then contact you back, the candidate, and say, yep, you qualify, go to a 142 organisation, do some training and do the flight test.
Yeah. So,
and then once we finish the flight test, there's a 61-4 Bravo form that's completed by myself, and for an overseas conversion, and then of course from there we, all going well, it's submitted to CASA and the licence issued.
Yeah.
And they also get the instrument rating. One thing to note though with the instrument rating, if they are doing an overseas conversion, when they get their licence reprint, the actual the instrument rating's not actually on their licence. It's just deemed that they've got an ATPL licence, they have an instrument rating.
So it's kind of like an IPC, read that as a flight review concept.
So 12 months later from when they were issued their ATPL licence, they're required to do an FPC, unless of course they're in a cyclic system.
Yeah.
And then it varies from there.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know if it's still the case now, but in the past you needed, like I said, 2 partners. And if the captain did something, or the main assessment person, the FO, could actually potentially lose their licence too. Is that the scenario? Is that still the case?
No, you talk about in the flight test situation?
Yeah, I don't know. There was,
no, well, the person
you could get in trouble if someone else mucked up and you were just there to be the FO.
Look, it depends, because the person that's being assessed is the person in the left side.
Yeah.
Okay. The supporting pilot is there to assist him in his flight test, basically, acting, because they need to generate there's 3 components to go through. There's a mini chart flight they do between A and B with a couple of failures and things. Then there's abnormals, and then there's instrument approaches and things like that. It'll all be explained to anyone that was interested in going through this process. But essentially, the co-pilot really is not being granted anything at the end of it. He's there just to be a PM, basically, to assist the PF. It depends on the situation, because, if the PF, I suppose, driving the ship, conducts something silly or, gives a wrong instruction to the supporting pilot, and it's deemed that it was the pilot flying's problem, well, yeah, that could be a factor as well.
Yeah, so is it 2 people being tested at once, or is it just the one?
It's just the one.
So who is the FO? Is he or she someone that's also on course? Or because obviously that person's potentially going to affect your outcome.
Correct, yeah. But that's what I'm saying. You wouldn't conduct the test after the training, and it'd be discussed between the training provider, in this case Revesco. We would, the idea would be to have your supporting pilot train with you throughout the training, and then you rotate around. So therefore, you assist each other on the way through. So you've got an understanding of what each other does. As co-pilot, captain versus PM versus PF. Yeah. So
you're not picking someone off the couch outside.
No. Well, they have to be it'd be part of the training. So unless it's an organisation where they do their own in-house training, and then of course, they needed the flight test to be conducted. That's different, because some companies do their own flight training, and then I just roll up. The only thing I would need to do is look at their exposition and see how they do their 2 crew training and stuff, and be aware of that. And then I assess them based on the CASA, qualifications and the tolerances and as per the flight test form.
Yeah, sure.
So but to answer your question, if there was a supporting pilot who he's not the one he is being assessed, but not for a licence, because there's no first officer licences anymore. So the guy that is in the in the control seat, and we refer to that as the left seat, as a captain, he's the one that's being assessed. And what we look for is how he drives the first officer, because that can be a downfall as well. If he instructs him to do something and the first officer makes a mistake and it's not corrected, and the captain hasn't picked it up, well, that could go against him,
Yeah.
And things like that could be the quick reference handbook. He's asked for it, he's gone to the wrong page, or he's missed a check and the captain hasn't been picked up on that as the one that's being assessed. There's all these other factors, so it could be anything.
Yeah,
and John, and you've got your NTS ones,
of course,
as well, we've got to assess as well.
Yeah. So John, we've done a lot of that, obviously, on the course with the pilot flying, pilot monitoring, and I guess whilst it's not a complete natural environment, because we don't know the aircraft necessarily or systems, our different backgrounds, but I certainly found that with my training partner that sometimes you get a bit behind, but that's the beauty of it, isn't it? That first officer's there to back you up, or it could be the captain backing up the first officer who's doing the flying.
Yeah.
And really using that to step in and go, hang on, do you want this? And go, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, as we discussed in the classroom on day one, it's a matter of establishing a good rapport, and there being some mutual respect between the 2 crew that are operating, and for one to be prompting the other on something, as long as it's not sort of too over the top in an intimidating manner. Prompting is encouraged. It's that's called that is good support. Sometimes you'll find if one person's a little bit slower on it, the other person will overprompt. On some of the courses we've had to sort of take someone aside and say, back up, Tiger.
Yeah.
Because it can be a bit intimidating while someone's trying to learn to have that. It's the thing that actually gets that cockpit gradient going in there. You got to,
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Yeah. So as far as the test goes, so if someone's coming from an airline environment, how much of the course do they need to do, or is there an RPL process? They can't just go sit the test, can they?
No. Well, it depends. This is the thing, like if someone's coming from an airline, it would be think of a conversion sort of training. So an overseas person who already holds an ATPL license and they've never flown the type of aircraft they're conducting the test on, it would be silly not to do any training. So, we're not going to attempt a flight test in something we're not familiar with. So essentially what we do is we set up a bit of a training course for them based on them getting knowledge on that particular aircraft that we're flying, i.e. in this case could be the King Air. I run a bit of a ground school on the systems on it, and then they fly it, and then when we determine they're ready for the test, and then the WHO of the organisation and myself would get together in a Revesco and decide whether we continue with the flight test, or we go back to the candidate and say, look, you might need a little bit more training based on the fact, you're still working this particular aircraft out. It's just unfortunate because, some people that come from, say, as an FO on a 747 or currently even command, where they're doing conversion training, and then jumping into a King Air they haven't touched in many years, it's a big ask.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit like the MCC, isn't it? It's the aircraft's being used as the platform where you don't actually need to be King Air rated or type rated class rated.
They don't need to be, that's correct.
Yeah, you do.
We can do other, the type ratings on the other jets that we fly, but the point is the jets that Revesco have, a lot of the simulators are overseas based, so it's just not practical to fly over there and do the training and, the likes of flight safety and then utilise their simulators because of the expense. So I'm thinking the King is a practical, basic aircraft. It's a turboprop. It ticks all the boxes, and the candidate knows when he's ready. I've had a few clients where they took a little bit longer to get familiar with the King Air, and that's purely because they're just all they've flown in the last
not familiar.
20 years is flying, high, wide body jets, and coming back to something like that, it takes a bit of time, but they do get around to it. And the importance is having a good first officer supporting them in the flight test sense too. They're having a good understanding where they know each other and what they want and how they go about things.
Yeah, so for most airlines, I guess the MCC is now a requirement, but when does someone need to go and do an ATPL test, or when, I guess it's the majors that they could expect the ATPL would be done as part of their type rating versus when would they do it outside of that environment?
I think if you just start with an airline as a first officer, you've got frozen ATPL subjects. You've got to look at how much time you have to sit in that right seat to be considered for an upgrade, and that could be, it varies with airlines. At the moment, there's obviously it's all about supply and demand, and at the moment it's booming out there for pilots, but that's going to eventually slow down. So if you're just starting with the likes of, say, Qantas, for example, you've been put on like a A320 or something like that in your right seat, there's every chance that you could be in that right seat for 10 years. So it just depends on yourself. If you want to make that move and go and get your ATPL and be eligible to apply for other airlines, I suggest do it as soon as you can, because you're missing out on opportunities. And there could be, you might have, say, 400 hours in the right-hand seat, so you're very comfortable with that particular aircraft, like in this case the 320. And then suddenly now there's opportunities overseas where they were looking for direct entry captains on the A320 with X amount of time. Well, without the ATPL, you're not useful to it, and you will be eligible to apply. Yeah. So by the best thing to do is obviously go externally, do some training, get yourself up to scratch. And the idea is, you get someone that's qualified as 2 crew already and they've got that experience. Well, to get into King Air, it's just a case of them applying 2 crew logic in this King Air in this example. If they can get a sim buddy that matches themselves, works better, And then, of course, continue with a little bit of training to get used to the King Air. Then when we all decide that, they're ready to do the flight test, and we'll go through that next stage of doing the flight test. Yeah,
I think it's a good idea. You can wait for opportunities to come and before you, or you can sort of get yourself ready to go and grab it when it does come. And it's sort of the same thing people ask me all the time, should I get my gas turbine engine or just wait for a company to need me to get it? And I said, well, you could, but if someone else has got it, the company's going to go with the cheaper option generally, which is means you miss out.
Same thing with the MCC, like airlines now are wanting people to go externally and get it because they don't have the training available internally with the airlines. So they're saying to people, look, you're in a similar situation, you're doing yours because you've got an opportunity up and down. We get it all the time. People say, should I wait for it till I get that opportunity? Well, when they advertise, part of the minimums would be MCC. So how can you apply for that if you don't have it? I get a lot of things, we say we got it, and if we get the job, then we'll go and get it. And I go, well, that's up to you. But that could also go backwards.
Start a relationship.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, if anything, I suggest even if you don't have the subjects all passed, minimum, get your human factors is what you require in your CPL licence to do the MCC, and I totally recommend you go and get that now. And then it's one thing out of the way, it's never going to go away. And then you can focus on your subjects for ATPL, and then once you've completed that, the rest of them, then you can sort of put yourself in a position, once you get the hours required, the aeronautical experience required to be able to sit the flight test. And that can be done through, obviously, charter, and potentially airline, depending on what role you're playing there. But the main thing is, I'm finding a lot of guys that are currently flying with some of the regionals and stuff have been, they've got the hours, they've got the frozen subjects, but they've been told that it could be 5-6 years before they're upgraded. So, if you want to sit around for that period of time before you get your licence, there's many opportunities that have been lost. And I think that window's open now, and it's eventually going to close again. That's
the 6 to 7, 8 year cycle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does the MCC or ATPL have any bearing on, everyone's going to America at the moment? Is there any use, I guess, maybe, again, apart from exposure and anything?
Yeah, look, I think it does. There's a few people I know that have taken that move and made the move to the States. They're offering bonuses over there at the moment, because, as you know, there's a shortage of pilots, and young guys,
it's a huge place, yeah.
Happy to go there as a, first officer on, whatever's over there, one of the Embraers, and work their way up that way. I think, for a young guy that's not travelling around with a family, it's probably a good opportunity, because, it's not cheap to live over there in certain states. So I'd say grab it with both hands. But I find also in Australia, it's also drying up here as well. So, and I'm also finding people are returning from the States back to Australia to fill roles that are currently available. So at the moment, it's so much movement out there, as we know. And I suggest just get the qualification, and then you put yourself in a good position to advance yourself.
When do you think is what sort of tips, and ambulance going by, what sort of tips do you think you can sort of come up with for someone preparing for that ATPL course, especially if they're coming, hopefully they're in a turboprop usually by that stage, I would say, but...
Yeah. Look, even if they didn't have turboprop, obviously they might need all the aeronautical experience, your 9 hours and your IF and total time and stuff. But I reckon, just set yourself a bit of time to prepare, and if you've got leave coming up, take that opportunity to utilise that, rather than sort of, it gets a bit of a burden when you're taking leave.
And how long does the course take roughly?
Our course is 10 hours of training for someone that
in the simulator.
Yep. And
so that's 5 2-hour sessions, I guess.
Yeah, that's correct. And in that time they team up with someone else, so they're sharing the work, the hours. So theoretically, you're getting sort of 20 hours and only paying for 10.
Yep.
So.
And what about the ground component?
That's the ground component is we do that. So if someone's looking at coming through and doing those hours, and they have someone, we spend 3 days on the ground just going through systems on, in this case, the King Air they're doing it on.
Abbreviated ground school, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At the end of it, they don't get qualified to fly the King Air. They just get trained enough to know the systems to fly it, to be able to,
meet
demonstrate
assessment requirements. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we teach them, and then in the training we keep teaching multi-crew procedures. And then when we know they're ready for the flight test, we advance them onto the flight test. So it could take. Look, if people allow 8 days. They can, if they do it full time, they can sort of have it all finished within 8 days. When I say I'd say 10 days with a bit, a bit of time off in between.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. And John, what are some good ways to just help sort of develop some cockpit cockpit management and leadership sort of qualities that are going to be useful in that ATPL test? And obviously we do a little bit on the MCC, but what would you recommend there?
Oh, look, it's the sort of stuff that you really need to do in here is nothing different from just good communications in everyday life. Practice being a respectful person, because if you expect to be respected, the best way to actually have that happen is to respect other people. be nice, basically. If you be caring of people, do the work, do the study, learn the SOPs. There's no real secret to it. It's just if you're a good open communicator, you will fit into this very, very easily.
Yeah, and I think there's some advice my dad gave me long ago. We sort of touched on it when I interviewed him, but just as an F officer, as a first officer, going to that role where you're going to have to be challenged to speak up against someone potentially much more senior, that the knowledge of those SOPs, the aircraft, the system, so you can 100% back yourself that if you are going to speak up, you're not putting your foot in it. And it's a big call, isn't it?
Yeah, that is a thing that you find quite a lot. That if people don't know the systems particularly well, they'll be very hesitant to speak up. And some people, just via their demeanour, are a little bit shy. And I think the sentence that does it for me, which you might remember from the course we did, is the sentence that says, have enough respect for yourself to speak up. Because if it's a safety concern, and there's hundreds of air crash investigation examples of people who have sat there and not spoken up. And look, there's cultures where that respect of elders is enormous.
Absolutely.
So for those cultures where they grow up respecting their elders, probably more than we do here, it's actually harder for them because they're got someone there who's not only older but got a lot more hours. Yeah, and then there's some egos involved as well. So not particularly easy in those cultures where they've got to actually get over that, but incredibly important.
Yeah,
incredibly important.
No, that's it. Anything else we haven't touched on?
I think that covers pretty well anything.
All right, cool. All right, we'll go into the end of it then. All right, guys, look, that's really fantastic. So if someone wants to get onto the MCC and the ATPL, what's the best way to find you and register? And
for ATPL training, the cool, obviously, myself for the ATPL training and the flight test, and MCC for that matter. My mobile is 0412 427 815. If you're trying to email me, it's Wayne_Clemesha @yahoo.com.au.
Right. And John?
Yeah, and we're currently redoing the website at the moment, but it was flightcity.com.au. That will still work. It will be Revesco Aviation.com.au, which will sort of encompass the charter operation and the advanced flight training, or people can just call me 0413 943 915 and I'll answer any time, day or night.
Yeah, great. So the website, we can go from there. All right, look, to wrap up, I've just always got my last couple of questions that I ask. So, John, I'll start with you, then Wayne. Favourite aircraft you've flown?
Well, I love the Braz.
Yeah.
The Embraer 120 was it was a lovely aeroplane. When we were flying that, we actually we got the Fokker 100s, and of course, as you do in those situations, everyone would go, "Oh, this is a bigger aeroplane I'm going to fly." And unfortunately, I left the company before we got trained on that, because that was in that network going to Qantas era. But quite honestly, when we went for some familiarisation rides on there, you sat on the jump seat there and went, V1 rotate, positive brake, gear up, autopilot in. I went, oh.
A bit boring.
Yeah, because it's a bigger aeroplane, it's a numbers aeroplane, it's got to be more discipline in it. It was probably going to be a little bit of a disappointment. I'm disappointed that I didn't get to fly it.
Would have been nice either way.
It would have been absolutely a hoot. Yeah. But the Braz was a lot of fun. We'd hand fly it most of the time to transition. And then, because you're carrying predominantly unaccompanied minors, we would, when you get into a circuit...
Are we talking about digging holes minors or children?
Yeah, exactly. It's just my little pun. When you get into the circuit at any of these places, you in a CTAF, you can fly the aeroplane, sort of having to, no more than 15 degrees angle of bank so they don't spill their drinks.
Yeah, well, I think that's what makes it so useful there north, is there? Just such short hops and all that sort of thing. Yeah. All right, Wayne, what about you?
Gulfstream, mate. That's the G4. That's, I mean, fly various jets, but I think that one stands out.
Yeah.
She's pretty quick and sort of get to fly around the world, so
why not?
Can't argue with that.
You finally got out of WA for something other than the simulator. All right. Well, maybe John, we just covered it, but if there was an aircraft you could fly, what would it be?
Space shuttle?
I really I did a right seat hop to Melbourne in the Phenom 300 a couple of months ago. I just loved that aeroplane. It was probably not dissimilar to the 777, which I've obviously gotten to know very well here. But I would very much love to get rated on that. That's a hint, Pete.
Wayne?
Something I would have liked was the Concorde in its day.
Concorde, yeah.
That would have been the ultimate.
Yeah, I think just
Mark II with your hero.
Experience that supersonic flight would be amazing, wouldn't it? And we may well go back there. We'll see. All
It's
right.
coming.
Yeah. All right. And the last one, favourite movie.
Favourite movie. Oh wow. I've got to embarrassingly got to say I am a Top Gun tragic. I saw it in 1985, and it, when I come back in the next life, I'm going to be a fighter pilot. No question.
Probably the John Wayne classics.
Yeah.
Like sort of some of the Elsa. So.
That's brilliant. All right, guys. Look, thank you so much for joining me. Really informative, and anyone wants to know all the details, I'll put everyone's contact details in the content description of the episode. John and Wayne, thanks again.
Fantastic. Well,
Wayne, I think there's a phone call. All right, big thank you to the guys. Anyone who knows Wayne will understand that joke at the end there. If you like any details, as I said, John and Wayne's details are in the episode description below. Whatever the player you're listening to, you should be able to see that. If not, flick me a message and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction, or you can go to revescoaviation.com.au and check out their website there. All right, take care of yourselves, keep flying, keep studying hard, and keep those messages coming. I'm loving hearing from you, loving all the messages, the emails, the comments, the feedback. The podcast is going strong. There's so much more to come, and you guys sending those messages just keeps fueling me and keeps the positivity going. There's a heap to go. Just keep the messages coming. Love it. All right, guys, I'll stop waffling. Take care, and I will see you next week. And we'll finish off the threat and error management discussion. Until then, please, guys, and remember the golden rule. Aviate, navigate, communicate. See ya.